Hello guys and welcome to my new video, and today we're talking about every single healer in Season 4 PTO because I've tested every single healer. This is going to be a video focusing on Mythic Plus content. We're going to be looking at the good, the bad things that are happening to healers. We'll talk about some of the old tier sets returning, so let's go and get started. But first of all, if you like and enjoy this type of content, please like and subscribe because my plan is to make a video for each single week detailing my experiences so far. So if you enjoyed this type of format, please let me know. Also, keep in mind this video is not going to be including my tier list for healers right now because first of all, I think it's a little bit too early. Second of all, I'm expecting some big changes to happen for Season 4. At least I'm hoping for some class changes to happen. On top of that, I also feel that some of the tier sets also need further changes. And just some information about how we decided to test each and every single healer. I tend to test a single dungeon because I want to see how each healer is going to perform in that singular dungeon, and that is going to be Ruby Life Pools. In this case, I chose this dungeon because it is one of the highest HPS dungeons depending on which key level you're doing. I'm running similar gear across the board for every single healer, and that means using the same combination of trinkets in terms of one trinket that is going to provide damage, something like Suncallers, and another trinket that is going to be somewhat of a passive stat stick. And if you're not fully aware of, there is going to be key level squish in Season 4, which means that a plus 10 is going to be closer to a plus 20. On PTR servers, your item level is scaled to 499, but a high item level in Season 4 with high gear is going to be somewhere closer to 520 plus. So now let's go to Restoration Druid, and I kind of did stress this at the start of the video. There isn't a whole lot of changes happening for Season 4 in terms of PTR because only a couple of healers are getting different tier sets, and by different I mean all the tier sets because the community was able to vote on which tier set should return for the new season. Resto Druid, there is no new tier set. You're using the same Season 3 tier set, which is honestly a powerhouse when it comes to Mythic Plus content, and outside of, in terms of class balance, nothing has been really announced outside of last couple of weeks in terms of increasing the rejuvenation healing, which was more aimed towards raid performance. So how does Resto Druid feels when I'm testing that Ruby Life Pools? Honestly, if you know how to play Restoration Druid, and that is a big if, because there is a setup time in terms of optimizing your healing as Resto Druid. In terms of optimizing your DPS, you need to know when to go into your kitty form, when to use Heart of the Wild. Are you able to make use of the Heart of the Wild? But if you know how to play, if you know when to set up, if you're playing that, and you should be playing that double life bloom build, you're getting clear castings, your regrowths, working with tier set, your tier set and growth guardians, honestly, if you know how to play this spec, it's arguably one of the highest HPS healers when it comes to Mythic Plus content. It can really carry groups in terms of meeting those HPS checks. If you know how to optimize your DPS, you can provide a lot of priority damage. On top of that, Druid class provides that Mark of the Wild, Battle Res. Your survivability with bear form can be really strong if you know when to use bear form. Unless Blizzard decides to do further tuning, I think Resto Druid is going to dominate Mythic Plus once again. I think it's going to be a very popular class in Mythic Plus in terms of providing additional HPS or really strong HPS, meeting those HPS checks. Your tier set and growth guardians almost feels like it is made for Mythic Plus content. The hierarchy you're doing, the higher HPS checks are going to get. You might have less time to DPS, but honestly, this class feels very strong. When played correctly, it can still provide good utility when it comes to Mythic Plus content because it is harder to get that Mark of the Wild or get that Battle Res. I still think Druid is a very good option unless Blizzard is going to do some further tuning. Now let's go to Mistweaver Monk, and again, this is one of those healers that did not see a lot of changes. If you look at the last couple of weeks, there has been, again, introduction of a couple of new talents. There has been nerfs more specifically towards raiding performance because Mistweaver Monk has been really strong when it comes to all forms of content on live servers. But this is a Mythic Plus video, so what was my testing like when it comes to Mistweaver Monk in terms of Ruby Life Pools? Honestly, you're still using that Season 3 tier set, which makes sense because a lot of people want to vote for the tier set that made or that class was performing really well, and the Season 3 tier set is very nice to play around. I think if you enjoyed that or gravitate towards a melee playstyle, Mistweaver Monk with talents like Ancient Teachings, Jadefire Stomp, Awakened Jadefire, or things like Rising Mist, you can do so much healing through damage. It just feels like a complete or a very well designed melee healer, and I think there's a lot of players out there who hopped from other melee healers onto the Mistweaver bandwagon, and specifically Holy Paladin into Mistweaver, but we'll talk about that later on. My testing so far has been very good, and I think a lot of people are not surprised by this. Depending on the key level you're doing, again, if there isn't too many healing checks to be met, you can probably meet most of your healing requirements by using your DPS abilities. But when you reach a higher key level, you start to implement or other parts of your toolkit becomes more important. Things like Shalon's Gift is absolutely overpowered if you can use it really, really well. And I think Mistweaver Monk is looking to be, again, very strong in Season 4, but we also have seen that Blizzard has been relatively cautious about Mistweaver performance when it comes to all forms of PvE content, specifically Mythic Plus and Raids, and they've been doing quite a few changes. I'm not sure if there's going to be further tuning coming into Season 4, but if they're left unchecked, I think Mistweaver Monk is going to be in a very, very good position. It's also important to note that with Mistweaver Monk, you can sometimes feel like you have two different game styles within one spec, because in Mythic Plus, you might be running that Jade Fire Stomp, Ancient Teachings, you're doing a lot of your healing through damage, and in Raids, you might be playing a completely different playstyle with Yula. This can be viewed as a good or a bad thing, depending on which playstyle you prefer. Overall, I think Mistweaver Monk is looking very, very strong, and if you gravitate towards that melee gameplay, I don't think there's any better melee healers out there than Mistweaver Monk when it comes to Mythic Plus. And now let's go to Discipline Priest, and that's another healer where not a lot of things are changing, because most of you have voted for Season 3 tier set, which I think a lot of people are relatively happy about, because it does provide that cooldown reduction gameplay. A lot of Discipline Priests are running Mindbender build. It can be rewarding, but it can also be punishing depending on how you play. If you don't get to include enough casts, or if you misplay, I think it is an engaging class to play. I think it can be very fun, and it is still perceived as a really, really good class when it comes to high-end Mythic Plus pushing. But I do have to mention a couple of things. I think over the course of Season 3, and we're talking about Season 3 right now, Discipline Priest has a little bit fallen when it comes to the highest keys in the world, and that is partly due to the fact that Shadow Priest become meta, but also the fact that if you're playing Discipline Priest, especially if you're pugging content, I think Discipline Priest is best used when you have an organized group that knows how to make use of PI, your power infusion, that knows how to handle interrupts because you don't have an interrupt as a priest, that knows how to minimize the damage intake, because Discipline Priest can sometimes struggle meeting some of the highest healing checks, and this is why I feel like Discipline Priest really enjoys having Augmentation Evoker in the group. So because of this, I'm not sure if Discipline Priest can be placed in that S++ tier or something along those lines. I think Discipline Priest requires a group that can play around this priest's weaknesses, and if you have that group, you can have a really good time. But I think a couple of other healers, when it comes to Mythic Plus content, they're not really as restricted by the group composition as Discipline Priest is. But that is just basically my 2 cents based on what I've seen in terms of the highest keys done. Overall, I think Discipline Priest is still looking to be very strong when it comes to Mythic Plus content in Season 4, because nothing is really changing. I'm just telling you that Discipline Priest is best played in organized content that knows your weaknesses, that knows how to play around you, and if they do, you're going to have a good time. If you don't want to go through that, and if you're doing weekly keys and things like that, I genuinely believe the Holy Priest might actually be an easier option. But once you get to high enough keys where survivability might be the main reason for timing a key, Discipline Priest having double pain suppressions, having things like barrier, having damage reduction with lenience, providing stronger shields can actually be very, very impactful. So kind of pick your poison depending on which key levels you want to do in the next season. Let's go to my boy Restoration Shaman. That is the first healer in this video that actually received something new. And by new, I mean Season 1 tier set. And the community has voted. Season 1 has won. And Season 1 tier set is arguably one of the most passive things you ever seen. In terms of some of the changes that happened to it, the tier set has been buffed, and I've been running multiple different builds when it comes to Restoration Shaman, when it comes to, again, Ruby Life Bulls, and I think it felt pretty nice. I do have to say, the 2-set bonus, while your Cloudburst or Healing Stream is active, your chance to critical strike is increased by 15%. Might be a bit troublesome because the 2-set bonus is so strong, it might be pushing certain totems into being more meta, and in this example, Healing Stream Totem versus Cloudburst Totem, especially considering Healing Stream Totem recharge rate is faster. On top of that, there are quite a few bugs when it comes to Restoration Shaman in terms of trying to get the true value of the potential of the class. For example, I was running Healing Stream Totem, and Healing Stream Totem with the 2-set bonus is somewhat troublesome because, for example, if you have a Healing Stream Totem that has 5 seconds left and you activate another Healing Stream Totem, after those 5 seconds and the first Healing Stream Totem disappears, your 2-set bonus also disappears and does not refresh. And I'm hoping that's going to get fixed in the future, because right now the choices of the totem you want to use, because the 2-set bonus is very, very, very good, it can depend on these bugs. I know there's going to be a lot of people who might be really upset if you're going to be pushed towards Healing Stream Totem. I know there's a lot of people who don't like Cloudburst. I think Blizzard definitely will have to address how the 2-set bonus is going to work with Healing Stream and Cloudburst in terms of the uptimes, in terms of how the balance is going to turn out, because I know there's going to be a lot of people upset one way or the other depending on which totem is going to come out at the top. So that is probably my biggest concern right now in terms of the balancing. Outside of that, the tier set is extremely passive, and for me, Resto Shaman is a really fun healer to play. I think, generally speaking, Resto Shaman is in a decent position when it comes to Mythic Plus and raids. I think the HPS overall right now on live servers is very decent. I'm really looking at possibly maining this spec, because I just enjoy the gameplay, I enjoy what it has in terms of Mythic Plus and raids. I'm just really unsure about that Cloudburst Healing Stream Totem kind of debate right now. I'm waiting to see how that's going to turn out in terms of bug fixes and things like that. You also have to consider that the 2-set bonus is also going to contribute towards your damage on top of your healing, which a lot of the other Season tier sets were kind of lacking. Let me know if you're happy about Season 1 tier set making a comeback in the next season. How do you feel about this somewhat passive type of gameplay that it provides? How do you feel about the Cloudburst versus Healing Stream Totem kind of debate? I had a great time testing my Restoration Shaman, and I believe that this spec has a chance of surprising people out there in terms of its potential when it comes to pushing Mythic Plus keys and its fun aspect. If you've been thinking about playing Restoration Shaman in Season 4, I think this is a pretty good time to try it out. I just wish Blizzard would pay a little bit more attention to Restoration Shaman, because a lot of the times I almost feel like the class is a little bit forgotten. For example, Mistweaver Monk received quite a few new talents a couple of weeks ago. I wish that that kind of mentality of tuning and adding new elements to the class would also apply to Restoration Shamans, but I guess we'll just have to hope for the best in the future. Now let's go to Holy Priest, and that's honestly one of the healers that received the most changes. Not for Season 4 specifically, but for live servers right now, there has been a mini rework in terms of which talents you can pick up, how your damage works and things like that. And I spent a little bit of time testing it on PTO servers. Again, we tested out different builds. We were kind of playing around the new changes to some of your DPS talents, specifically things like Ethereal Blaze. I really kind of, and this is going to be a little bit weird, but I enjoyed the gameplay loop between Holy Word Chastise and Holy Fire. The amount of damage that you can do, because there's a bunch of talents, there's a bunch of cooldowns that work with resetting Chastise cooldown or lowering Chastise cooldown, using Divine Word for Chastise or with Chastise to increase your damage, and then Holy Fires, and it kind of has this feedback loop where you can do or pump out an insane amount of damage. This is not specific for Season 4, this is specific for live servers and the rework that happened very recently. But the amount of damage, if you're allowed as a Holy Priest to DPS, the amount of damage you can do, you're arguably one of the top DPS healers right now. And honestly, that gameplay loop between Chastise and Holy Fire is really fun for me right now. But maybe that's also that honeymoon period that you go through when a class has been recently changed, in my opinion, might alter in the future. But overall, Holy Priests are going to be using the same Season 3 tier set, which I think a lot of people are kind of relatively happy about. I think the Holy Word kind of gameplay that you have as Holy Priest is relatively fun. I think the new mini rework has been pretty decent. I'm not sure how Holy Priest is going to feel at really high key levels, trying to meet really high HPS or healing checks, because I just honestly did not get to test that. Really, let me know how you feel about Holy Priest rework right now on live servers. How do you feel about meeting high HPS checks? Playing Holy Priest, especially for lower keys or poke keys, is going to be a lot less demanding than playing something like a Discipline Priest, who in my opinion relies more on the group. I think Holy Priest is a very solid healer that can cover a lot of the mistakes, because a lot of your Holy Word spells just kind of slap. And I think the damage gameplay loop is relatively fun to play around. So I didn't get to test Holy Priest when it comes to really high healing checks for really high keys, but overall in the key level that I was testing, Holy Priest was really good in terms of covering a lot of players' mistakes. I think the damage was good, and I think a lot of people are going to gravitate towards Holy Priest and the rework. Let me know how you feel about that. Let's go to Preservation of Evoker. It's one of the few healers that actually received a new tier set, and by new I mean Season 1 tier set, but actually it's not really Season 1 tier set, because the 2-set bonus has actually significantly changed from its original kind of design. With the new tier set, there's going to be a different or possibly different gameplay loop introduced when it comes to Mythic Plus content. I'm not sure how that's going to look in raids. Honestly, I'm not looking at raids at all. I'm looking at Mythic Plus right now. For example, keeping reversions on your group, even if the group is full HP, because the healing doesn't have to be effective. Reversion healing is going to proc your 4-set bonus. Your 4-set bonus is going to empower your living flames, make them instant cast. You can use it to DPS or heal. For example, you're running Mythic Plus content, nothing is really happening, you're keeping reversions on your group members. That's going to proc your 4-set bonus. You use living flames to DPS. The DPS of Preservation Evoker is actually pretty high. Now, if someone or the group needs healing, you probably still have those reversions on the group. You use your empowered abilities and your reversion healing is increased. So you have this very minimalistic, almost, again, I'm not sure if it's going to be regarded as intriguing gameplay, where keeping reversions and playing around those reversions can actually boost your healing or boost your DPS, depending on what you need at that given state. Again, some people might look at this and they might be like, this promotes overhealing, or this is not that engaging. I relatively like the gameplay with the tier set. I'm not 100% saying this is going to be the best way to play, but this is something that I was testing out. Again, PTR servers are all about testing. It's all about different gameplays, different talents. So I was messing around with a bunch of different builds. I enjoyed the gameplay. Now, Blizzard has done a lot of changes in the last couple of weeks in terms of Preservation Evoker. They've done a lot of like kind of incremental HPS increases. They increased your survivability. They acknowledge the fact that Preservation Evoker still suffers from, again, the range limitations can actually be extremely painful. For example, I was testing Ruby Life Pools, and there are a couple of Ruby Life Pool dungeons that I did with range compositions, and the last boss, if you remember the last boss, and if you have ranged all over the place as a Preservation Evoker, I was very quickly reminded, no matter how good Evoker feels, the new legendary and all those things, all it takes is one boss to be reminded of the range limitations. Even if Blizzard acknowledges that, hey, you have range limitations as Preservation Evoker, but now you have a bit more healing and a bit more survivability, so deal with it. That is not the right way to approach this right now, because the main reason why Preservation Evoker was meta in Season 1, because it did like 20% more healing than a bunch of other healers. So a lot of players were like, okay, I can play around the range limitations because my healing is absolutely busted. You're not really going to have that in Season 4. Your healing is not going to be that much ahead of everyone else. Or maybe I'm going to be wrong. Maybe Blizzard is going to add additional tuning. Maybe they're going to increase their healing, but I would be very, very surprised. The range limitations are still very much a pain in the ass, specifically for certain dungeons, certain bosses, or certain compositions. And no matter what the gameplay is going to look like for Preservation Evoker, unless your damage or healing is way above everyone else, the range limitations are going to be the biggest downfall of this spec. Let's forget about the range limitations. Let's say you're a player that's willing to play around this issue. Let's say you have a group that's willing to play around your limitations, that's willing to help you heal, which is very, very hard to find, but let's say you can do that. You have a bunch of other issues as Preservation Evoker or Evoker in terms of getting invited to high Mythic Plus content, because trying to get as many different buffs and utilities is very, very important, and augmentation exists. Augmentation is still very popular for high Mythic Plus content, and trying to get augmentation and preservation in the same group means you're kind of overlapping utility. And now, based on my testing on PTR servers for Season 4, you also have to kind of compete with Devastation. Devastation is absolutely popping off right now. The amount of damage you're dealing or doing as Devastation Evoker is really, really high. So unless things are going to change, as Preservation Evoker, not only you have to deal with the range limitations, which is a lot more difficult as a healer versus a DPS, but you also have to deal with the fact that right now on PTR servers, you have to compete with the viability of Augmentation Evoker and the fact that Devastation Evoker is also popping off. And honestly, for me, if they changed or removed some of the range limitations for Preservation Evoker, I would actually really think about maining this spec, because I think it is a very fun spec to play. I actually main Preservation Evoker in Season 1 and Season 2, and I wouldn't mind coming back to this spec if some of the issues were addressed. But I apologize for sounding salty. I don't really agree with some of the design philosophies from Blizzard when it comes to maintaining Preservation Evoker, because I still had a lot of fun with this spec. I really enjoyed the gameplay from the tier set. I'm not sure how that's going to translate in raids, but at the end of the day, for this video, I had a bunch of fun. You can play around the range limitations if you really want to, if you have an organized group, and you also have a legendary to look forward to. So there is quite a few things to be excited about this Preservation Evoker. Let's go and talk about Holy Paladin. And honestly, this is one of the healers that I tested the most on PTR servers, because I was really unsure about how to feel for the Season 2 tier set coming back. A lot of people voted for Season 2 tier set, which again, if you haven't played Season 2, it makes your Holy Shock critical strikes heal for more. It also puts additional power to your Holy Prism or Light's Hammer. I'm fully aware of the fact that there's probably going to be different builds for Holy Paladins when it comes to Mythic Plus content and when it comes to raid content using Holy Prism or Light's Hammer. It really is going to depend, but for a lot of the testing that I did, I was using something like Holy Prism in Mythic Plus content. I was doing a bunch of different gameplay options, different talents, different builds, trying to see how Holy Shocks felt and things like that. I was so unsure about Holy Paladin that in PTR I was actually running or ran dungeons with Season 3 tier set, and then I would run a dungeon with Season 2 tier set back to back, just to compare how these two different tier sets were feeling to me. And my overall conclusion, I don't know which tier set I actually prefer because they have different positives and negatives. I think a lot of people who have been playing Holy Paladin in Season 3, I think a lot of them have swapped over to Mistweaver Monk. And I don't think that the changes right now in terms of the different tier sets, I don't think those Holy Paladins who are playing Mistweaver Monks, they're not going to swap over to Holy Paladin in the current state that it is right now. I still think there's a lot of issues with Holy Paladin. Your Holy Power spenders don't feel all that impactful. I think the fact that there is so much power tied into Glimmer of Light, I think there should be more power tied into the Holy Shock ability by itself. Don't get me wrong. The 2-set bonus from the Season 2, your Holy Shock crits, you can definitely see the difference. But I actually almost believe that that should be the default baked into the spec. There is a lot of issues the Holy Paladin still has, and I don't think the 2-set bonus is going to fix that. I know there's a lot of people out there who voted for Season 2 specifically because they thought that, hey, if I vote for Season 2, I'm going to go back to the glory days of Holy Paladin. Season 2 Holy Paladin is one of the most overpowered healers that I ever played in World of Warcraft. And that's not going to be replicated in Season 4 unless something is going to change with this spec specifically. Because right now, I'm not sure if I prefer Season 2 or Season 3 tier set. I've been testing a lot. I don't know what my conclusion is. I genuinely believe that I had a lot more fun or better time with a lot of healers than Holy Paladin. I'm not going to create a tier list right now because I do believe that there's going to be more tuning in Season 4. And I think Holy Paladin is a prime candidate for that tuning or buffs if there's going to be some. And before I end the section for Holy Paladin, I think Holy Paladin, when it comes to raiding content, you still provide a decent amount of utility in terms of damage reduction, in terms of Devour, Aura Mastery, and you can actually track the contribution of the damage reduction in Warcraft logs under the mitigation tab, and you can see the value that you bring to the raid. When it comes to Mythic Plus content, I think this spec could actually use quite a bit of help. I think there should be further tuning, but I'm a little bit scared about the fact that Blizzard has been very scared about buffing Holy Paladin ever since the rework in Season 2. Blizzard has just been consistently nerfing Holy Paladins. I think they over-nerfed it quite a bit, and then only in the last couple of weeks, I think Blizzard has kind of been looking at Holy Paladin a little bit. I think they're very scared about going back to the days of Season 2, but I really think this class could use some help. And I don't think Season 2 tier set bonus is enough to make it meta in Mythic Plus content. And before I end the video, I want to talk about some of the tier lists. I know I said this at the very start that I'm not going to include my own tier list, and I'm not. This is a tier list generated by a website called Mythic Stats. You can go into the meta section here and see how it works. It's basically like a spec diversity, and a lot of the times, the most popular specs in high keys means specs that can perform really well. And you can see here that Mistweaver Monk, Restoration Druid, and to some extent Discipline Priest is doing quite well. And you can actually see from this list, and if you go to specs right here, I actually agree with this tier list a lot of the times when it comes to really high keys, because I do believe that Mistweaver Monk is one of the best healers right now when it comes to Mythic Plus content, or any forms of content, or any forms of PvE content. I'm not sure how it does in PvP, maybe it's also good, I don't know. But Mistweaver Monk is really good. I don't think that's going to change right now based on what I've seen in Season 4. Resto Druid is really good. Nothing's really happening to them. They're still going to be really good unless there's going to be further tuning. Discipline Priest, I talked about why Discipline Priest does not deserve to be in S tier because it is so reliant on the group, and also the fact that Shadow Priest in Season 3 is really powerful and you don't want to overlap the utility. So I do think, again, I have to look at Shadow Priest in Season 4. I haven't really looked at it too much, but I don't think Discipline Priest fully deserves that S tier yet. But in an organized content, you're going to have a good time as Discipline Priest. And honestly, all other healers, for example, Preservation Evoker, if you look at the output of Preservation Evoker, both in Season 3 and Season 4, they don't deserve to be in D tier. I think you can do a good amount of damage, a good amount of healing, but the output of Preservation Evoker does not deserve them a D spot. What deserves them a spot really low in this kind of rankings, the fact that the range limitation is really annoying and you have to compete with something like Augmentation Evoker. I truly believe that in Season 4, if nothing changes, Devastation Evoker is going to climb from that F tier to S tier. If nothing really changes, we'll have to see, but Devastation is kind of pogging right now, so Preservation Evoker would have to compete with Augmentation and Devastation in order to find that Mythic Plus spot, which is not really going to be helpful. And Holy Paladin, again, Holy Paladin is getting a new tier set, which I don't know how to feel about this right now. I don't think Holy Paladin is going to climb all that much if nothing is really changing. I expect Season 4 class tuning to happen, and I think Holy Paladin is going to be one of the healers that could use some of the help. I just think Blizzard is very scared about doing any buffs for Holy Paladin because they don't want to go back to Season 2 Holy Paladin, where it was the only option. But I definitely believe Holy Paladin could use some changes. I think Resto Shaman is looking to be pretty decent. I think Resto Shaman, we'll see if there's going to be more changes. I actually hope the Blizzard could look at some of the talents that are unused for Resto Shaman, and they could buff them in order to add more variety when it comes to that Mythic Plus content or even raids. And on top of that, Holy Priest has received a sizable rework, and this is live right now. People can check it out. I'm not sure what how Holy Priest feels in high keys when trying to reach or trying to meet some of the really high HPS checks. I'm not sure, you can let me know, but I really like the feedback loop that you have with Chastise and Holy Fire. I think it feels really rewarding, and I think Holy Priest generally input content is going to feel a lot easier to play than something like Discipline Priest, or less restrictive. But at the same time, if you're playing really high keys with an organized group, and again, Discipline Priest is one of those healers that kind of wants to have an augmentation with you because it helps you to meet those healing checks easier. But as a Discipline Priest, you also have double pain suppression, you have barrier, you have damage reduction with lenience, stronger shielding, which can be the defining factor when doing really high keys, and survivability being the main reason for timing a key. I don't want to ramble on too much and focus on tier lists and things like that, because I just want to showcase to you that right now in Season 4 PTR, there's not a lot of changes. Only a couple of healers are getting a new tier set in terms of old tier set coming back from previous seasons, and that is going to be Restoration Shaman, Preservation Evoker, and Holy Paladin. And those tier set changes alone are not going to make a huge shift in the community perception. What is actually going to matter is going to be class tuning, and I'm hoping that there is going to be class tuning in Season 4. We'll have to see if Blizzard is going to be looking at some of the outlier classes out there that are performing really well or are really popular when it comes to high Mythic Plus content. We'll have to see if Blizzard is going to be looking at nerfing specs or buffing classes. We'll have to look if Blizzard, in my opinion, Blizzard is also going to add additional tuning to some of the tier sets as well. So right now, not enough has changed, in my opinion, to actually alter the meta too much. I think the specs that are feeling really good, they're still going to be feeling really good. I think people have to wait for some of the class tuning, and I think people have to wait for some of the tier set tuning right now. This video is mainly trying to showcase that, hey, these are my findings for this given week. Let me know if you want to see a similar video like this next week or a week after, and maybe later down the line I will look into actually providing my own tier list based on classes that I feel are really fun, or classes that are really powerful, or classes that I think are going to be meta. But for class to be meta, you also have to know what are the meta DPS, what are the meta tanks and things like that, because you want to try and kind of min-max the buffs that you have or the utility that you have in that 5-man group. Let me know how you feel about this video. Let me know about which healer you're looking to play in Season 4, or which healer you think needs to have more changes. Let me know, and I'll see you in my next guide.